everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your normal podcast for all things Assassin's Creed.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 135 of Let's Talk Assassin's Creed. This episode is one that really we got the idea from, or the inspiration for, from just a few weeks ago when we were recording our episode on replayability with Arshak and Andrew. And first of all, I'll welcome our guest, and then we'll talk a bit more about how this came to be. So first of all, Hayete, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
It's great to have you here. I'll tell you why, because we were talking about replayability a few weeks ago with two very long-term fans of the franchise and community creators and so on. We were talking about how it's great to go back and replay individual sequences, both to get the optional objectives or just to try out different approaches and so on. And we were chatting about one particular sequence, and it just triggered a memory in my brain. And I thought, I remember reading a series of Reddit posts over the last year or so about someone that is doing a no damage run. And I mentioned it to the guys when we were recording. And I mean, I don't know, Declan, if you could do some magic editing and drop Andrew's voice in here at this point, but he was stunned. He went, "What? That's crazy. That's not possible." And I thought, well, let's see. So found your master Reddit thread, and we'll link that in the show notes where you document your entire playthrough. Contacted you through Twitter, and you said, yeah, I'd love to come on and talk about it. So yeah, this week we are talking about Hayate's amazing, honestly, I still can't believe you did it, no damage playthrough of Assassin's Creed. Really incredible.
Yeah, I'm surprised I did it, so thank you. I really appreciate it.
But it's not your first no damage run. This is something that you like to do as a personal challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, so it all kind of started basically when COVID was like at its peak, right back at the beginning of 2020. I'd gotten sent home from work, not fired or anything, but they were like, "Hey, everyone, go home, work from home because of what's going on." And I found myself with just so much extra time because I wasn't having to commute, I wasn't having to get ready, I wasn't having to do all the normal stuff you would do, and I was watching more Twitch. I wasn't streaming at the time, but I was watching more people on Twitch, and I came across a very good friend of mine now, Thunderceptor11 on Twitch, who was trying to no damage Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on the hardest difficulty. And I was watching him do it, and I was like, man, this looks so fun. I was like, I think I could do that. Like, I was watching some of what he was doing. I was like, I wonder why he doesn't try this or why he doesn't try that. And I was like, I had the game, so I booted it up and I started working on it. And that's where it all started. And then, basically throughout all of the pandemic, I, just game after game after game after game that I was interested in doing. And it just kind of became a hobby of, let's try and no damage games that people wouldn't generally think you could do them no damage. So that's kind of where it started.
Go on, Declan.
I was just say, you mentioned Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and right now I just want to do that Wayne's World emotion of I'm not worthy, because I played that on normal difficulty and I literally could not get past the first planet. So hearing people manage to complete the game with no damage runs is just mind-melding. I play Dark Souls. I should be good at timing and parrying, but nope, I can't even complete games on normal difficulty without dying.
It's funny because I've been on Reddit a lot, not so much lately, just because more so I've been focused on Assassin's Creed, but prior to that, I was on Reddit a lot. Just, I like to help people. I like when people are having issues or when they're like, I don't know how to do this. You see Reddit posts all the time of like people getting upset or frustrated. I can't beat this section. I don't know what to do here. And I very much like imparting my knowledge and my information and teaching people. I like to be educational. And I have had many conversations on Reddit with people that had that same viewpoint. They're like, I've played all the Dark Souls games. I've been able to get through those, and I just don't understand this. And I played Dark Souls 3 for about 10 minutes and uninstalled it because it was frustrating. And I found, at least in my opinion, and I know this is kind of off on a tangent already, but in my opinion, it's because of the mechanics, the way the developers built the foundational mechanics of that game are completely 180 degrees from Fallen Order. The best example is dodge rolling. So dodge rolling in Fallen Order is a 2-button input. So the first button gives what I call a short dodge, and the second one gives you a roll, like a dodge roll, which is very akin to like Assassin's Creed Origins, right? Except it's in 3 parts in that game. But in Dark Souls, you just have the roll. The difference lies in that in Dark Souls, the roll doesn't occur until the input is released, whereas in Fallen Order, it happens as the input is pressed. So there's a delay, there's a desync between the two games on the foundational level of the mechanics and the way that they were developed. And it's very hard for people that are really heavy in Dark Souls to then go to Fallen Order and have it not feel clunky, and vice versa, at least from what I've found.
That would make a lot of sense. And to be honest, this show's full of tangents, so we just go with it by now.
Well, you love the Soulsborne games, don't you, mate?
I do.
So I'm just going to go off and make some more tea and let you two carry on. This is great.
To be honest,
I could talk about Fallen Order for hours, easily.
I think I can understand where you come from with Fallen Order, because I've been playing Elden Ring a lot lately. And playing that, then looking at like Valhalla, because not even played Valhalla recently, I think it was Syndicate. But you start to notice how like games like Elden Ring do have a lot more precise niche to the timing. So parrying's a lot more tighter. You've got to dodge at the right time. Some of the boss AoE attacks can miss you if you dodge at the right time. Whereas when I did play Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, that's what stumbled me, that it wasn't about timing. You didn't have to be so to the dot. So if an enemy charged at you, you didn't have to wait till the last second for the dodge to work. You could dodge earlier, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. That's why I think I struggle playing Assassin's Creed, because I'm trying to parry at the last second, and then I realise, no, it's not working. I should be stealthing.
Yeah, so specific to like timing mechanics, so Jedi Fallen Order is all timing, and so is Dark Souls and everything else in that genre. And so what I used to tell people when they were, hey, I just can't, I can't seem to parry, I can't seem to do these things, is the developers in many games, like nowadays, they do a really good job of coding and animating sync together so that what you see is the timing. That didn't always used to be the case, like in old games, but today I find in a lot of games it is, and it 100% is for Fallen Order, and for Valhalla. Is an enemy, let's say just a simple like a swing of a saber or a swing of a sword, right? In either game, right when it looks like it would hit you, like what you're visually seeing, that's the timing you would need to block to get a perfect parry or a counter or whatever. Is really my experience with it, and that's usually what I suggest.
What you said there about perfect parry is really interesting. So reading through your Reddit summary of your Valhalla playthrough, and what we'll do, everyone, is we'll link to Hayete's kind of master post where he links to then all of his individual game summaries. But in your Valhalla, I'll start this question by saying that I really didn't enjoy Valhalla's melee combat. I just couldn't parry. I didn't understand the timing. Like I would click. I have parry mapped to a thumb button on my mouse because I find that much more sort of natural, rather than on Q or E or whatever it is by default. And you click and she wouldn't move. And so, why isn't she parrying? I need to parry now. And I just never got into that. I never got the timing right. And that's on me. I know that. But coming from Odyssey, where I just found it, for want of a better word, responsive, where a lot of my combat in Odyssey was about getting the parrying and then the counter-attacking right when you open up the enemy for a counter-attack. I found that very satisfying. And then coming to Valhalla, where everything just feels a bit more slow, which I guess is the intention of the developers. But yeah, I just couldn't parry. In the end, I just went with dual spears and carved through the enemies. But so I was fascinated to read that you said there's a specific perfect parry mechanic then in Valhalla that gets you additional bonuses.
Yeah, so to kind of go back, you're 100% right. The word I use, or the words I choose to use for Valhalla, is Valhalla feels really heavy and weighted,
Mm.
whereas Odyssey felt very like loose and almost like it just flows,
Flow
which
is a
is
great
one
word. Yeah.
which is one of the reasons why Odyssey, and if you go read my posts, I'm sure some people are going to tear me apart for it, but out of the entire series, if I had to pick one game to only play forever, it would be Odyssey out of all the Assassin's Creed games. And that's because of,
Let me
eh,
just tell you, you're among
sure.
friends because I love Odyssey. So yeah,
I love
all
Odyssey
good.
too. It gets a bad rap in my opinion, but yeah, Valhalla feels very weighted, and you can feel that. Like if you basically download both games and you just boot them both up and you walk around, you don't have to do parkour, you don't have to fight, just walk around, just hold forward, turn around, just walk down a street and then do that in Valhalla. You'll feel the difference. Immediately, you feel the difference. It's very weighted in Valhalla. And it's one of the reasons why I like it. I don't have necessarily proof. This is just kind of like my gamer mind inferring from the mechanics and like my experience. But Odyssey gives a lot of leeway with their counter system. You can counter early.
Mm,
So,
mm,
specific to what I was saying earlier, like, if you were thinking in real life as somebody's bringing a sword down, you're basically safe, 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 safe until you're not. And that not would be when it connects with you to damage you, right? So in Valhalla and a lot of other games, that's when you would want to bring up your block or your counter or whatever the input is when that attack would be just about to hit you. In Odyssey, you could probably do it, a little bit early and it will still take. So there's a little bit of give on Odyssey, whereas Valhalla, there's not. And that's one of the reasons why I said that out of all of the games, the combat in Valhalla was my favorite because it really forced skill out of you. And I had a hard time kind of going between that one and Unity because Unity also forces a lot of skill out of the player. But with Unity, you can you can do more like what I call cheese. You can kind of cheese the mechanics a little bit to keep yourself from being damaged. Whereas in Valhalla, you really can't because if you miss too much or if you block too much, then you're gonna get your guard's gonna get broke. You'll run out of stamina, and then they're able to attack you. So there's almost like a Dark Souls esque balance with resource in Valhalla that you never have in any of the other games, which is one of the reasons why I think it's the best combat. It's not perfect, obviously, but if they were to iterate on that and improve on that, I think they could make the combat more rewarding for like greater skill. Like the greater skill you have, the more you get out of the system, if that makes any sense.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
to be honest, I just want to on that combat. I think it's really nice to hear because that's how I've always felt with Valhalla's combat. I think because it is more skillful and more weighted, it kind of makes you feel more in the shoes of an assassin per se. Because my problem with combat and all the games, and a little bit with Odyssey, I do like Odyssey. I think it's a great game. Is the combat feels a little bit too easy? With the older games, the counter system's just overpowered. Odyssey combat's fun, but it does feel a bit like more fluid and a little bit more floaty, so it's kind of easier. But kind of Valhalla mix with a weighted sense and a little bit of skill. Like this is what an assassin would have to deal with. The perfect timing to dodge or to parry, the perfect timing. So it kind of like I agree with you on why the combat in Valhalla is a little bit better. I just don't like the ability wheels personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot to like out of all of the games, given their various combat elements and at the times that they were created, and then looking at the gaming world at the time that those games were created, a lot of what the Assassin's Creed games have done, at least in my opinion, is kind of push the boundaries on certain things, um, and I know that's probably a that's a statement that might be controversial, but that's just my opinion. Um,
I find that interesting because I've come to these games just in the last couple of years. So I just finished. I mean, I played through all of the series last year, most of them for the first time. I've just gone back and replayed AC2. but my viewpoint will always be, I don't know how did these games feel at the time. Were these games revolutionary in certain ways, or evolutionary, or a little bit behind the curve, because I'm playing them in some cases 15 years too late. So it's really
Right.
interesting to hear you say that actually there is some good innovation, or at the time these games were, when they were released, they were kind of leading with their design and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, because if you look back at what did we have? I mean, you basically had Prince of Persia. I mean, what else kind of did what Assassin's Creed did? Nothing.
Mm.
So every time, and I guess at some point it becomes derivative of itself, right? And then people start comparing it to itself, which I think is always kind of shaky ground to stand on, because when you're comparing within a franchise and decisions made within a franchise against itself, and you're never looking outside as to what influenced those decisions, I feel like you're setting yourself up for failure. But funny that you said you were replaying all the games, because most of these games, I did this in less than a year, doing all 12 mainline games without damage. And many of those games, that was the first time I was returning to it. So for example, like Assassin's Creed, like the original Assassin's Creed, when I started working on the no damage run for that, I hadn't played it since 2007 or 8 or whenever it had come out.
Oh, interesting.
On
Right.
console. So I hadn't played it since then. So it was more like I was rediscovering the games. And then everything after from Black Flag to Origins, I had never played. Like, I had never touched them. I was in the military, at the U.S. military, for almost a decade, and a lot of, like, when Syndicate and Unity and these different games were coming out, I was nowhere near the state of mind or availability to really play them. So, I was playing these things. Like, my first playthrough was me going through it and enjoying it, and then also kind of eyeing it. Okay, what's going to be a problem? How would I deal with this? And things like that.
Okay, so you did kind of scope out each game before you committed fully to, right, now we're doing the no damage run, just to learn the mechanics and so on.
Yeah, and what's interesting was I didn't think Assassin's Creed, like the original, I'll just say AC1 from now on. I didn't think Assassin's Creed 1 was possible. I did not think it was doable. For two specific areas, well, really for one reason, but two specific areas that reason is a problem. And I actually ended up getting Assassin's Creed 2 no damage, and I think Brotherhood done first. So I didn't necessarily get them done in order. I got, if I remember correctly, I got those two done first, then I got AC1, and then everything that came after that was in order of release.
So actually, on the AC1 topic, I wanted to ask you about this because as preparation for this this recording, you sent me a link to an interview you'd done. I think this was one of your friends, wasn't it? And you were describing in that interview that when you were planning for your AC1 run, you were kind of stuck with the guards and how to handle them. But apparently you got some help from the community in that there are certain visual cues that the guards will give you to give you that attack window. Could you describe that? Because it was an absolutely fascinating insight into the little design cues that are put into these games.
Yeah, sure. So, and there's a funny story with that. The the advice versus the actual solution turned out to be not they're very, very far apart from each other.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But yeah, at the time that I had that interview, that was I think I was running Assassin's Creed 2, or I had just got done doing no damage in it. And the way that I've been doing these runs, and the way I do all of my runs, are that I'm never just doing one run. I'm always working on what comes next as well. And that's just, to keep your mental state good, and you don't get burnt out or super frustrated with any one thing and just kind of want to quit, right? So at the time, I was doing AC1, and I was trying to figure out essentially memory block 6. So that's the last memory block in the game. And there's two sections there. So there's one in Acker, where you go to the funeral and you get ambushed, right? And you have to deal with the enemies. And then there's assassinating Robert. And anyone that's played those game or played the game and played those sections will know that that last one in Assassinating Robert, basically you're going through like 50 enemies or something just to get to him.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of in like a, almost like everybody circles around you, and then it's just like you versus a bunch of guys that are completely, encompassing the whole area and attacking you at the same time. And the problem I kept running into, and it really came down to those two sections, because there wasn't like any high ground you could get. There wasn't really any way for you to kind of exploit or turn it into your favor. It was just, how good are you with the combat? And that's what it came down to, which is generally not how I like to do strategy. I like to make strategies where they're basically in my favor, and it's never a fair fight for the AI. And this instance, for those two instances, there's nothing you can do about it, essentially. And what it revolved around a mechanic where in AC1, and AC1's the only game that had this problem, where if you're being too aggressive on enemies, you're just hitting, they'll actually deflect your attack, and then they'll hit you back. And so that kind of forces you to be defensive, because when you're being offensive, it's very, very hard to react to that because you're in the moment. Whereas if you're being defensive, you're just kind of waiting, right? And they can do that to you as well while you're waiting. They'll come in, they'll knock your sword away, and then they'll go and attack. And my problem was the game, as a tutorial, right? Like going through the game, they never really teach you how to deal with that. Like they teach you how to dodge, but they don't teach you how to dodge that. And for whatever reason at the time, my brain just wasn't making the connection. And so I was like, I don't know how to do this. It just feels like RNG, and I'll never know when it's coming. So I don't know what I can do about it. So I reached out to the Reddit community and said, hey, this is my problem. And a lot of people came back with, hey, there's this technique, and I can't remember what they called it in the community. I guess it has a certain name. But basically in Assassin's Creed 1, you'll get this where enemies will like kind of twitch. They'll do something. They'll like look around, they'll look at the ground. They'll kind of flurry their weapon or whatever, right? But they'll do something other than the normal, like engaged posture against you. And apparently when that happens, you can swap to your hidden blade and you can assassinate them. So what I was explaining in that interview, and I had just gotten that information at the time of that interview. So I was explaining what they were telling me, and that would open then the possibility of me to kind of chain back and forth from enemy to enemy to enemy to enemy if I was lucky. What ended up being the solution was that when people kind of deflect your sword away, you just have to hit the dodge button. It was very simple. And
all those complex observations of mechanics, and it just comes to just dodge.
Yeah. It was one of those very simple things that once you know it, you're like, man, I'm an idiot for not having thought of that. But then again, the game doesn't tell you either. And I can't remember how I stumbled on it. I think I saw it happen and I was frustrated. And so I was just like moving keys, like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like just moving a bunch of keys. And I happened to hit the space bar at the right time, and he dodged left. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. So and this was the Acker funeral ambush is where I found this out, because what my strategy was to run away and get up on this building and basically just, throw, throwing blades or knives or whatever at them and kill them off one at a time, and then deal with whatever was left. And so I had the beginning of a strategy. I just needed the end of it. And now I had the end of it. And I was like, let me go and try that. So I sat there for probably 30 minutes to burn it into muscle memory. I just sat there with one enemy and just let them attack me and just let them keep attacking me. And it's random, completely random if they do that kind of, deflect of your guard. But I just waited and let them keep doing that, and then just practice hitting the button and getting the timing down. And finally I got it, and I was like, okay, let's start doing runs. And now I have an answer and a solution for this. And that's how I got the run. Without that little bit, I did not, like, that run would not have been possible without that. So I'm really happy that mechanic existed in the game.
Listening to with the AC one, with the tutorial, there is in Messiah a little fighting ring where they try and teach you abilities and techniques. And now I can think of it, and I'm replaying it now little by little. I really don't think I've ever discovered a dodge. The flicker and twitch movement is very similar to but it's more prominent in AC2, I believe, to the taunt, where they would like flex the muscles or like
Right.
they would do the little sword twirl and then attack. So I have seen that in Assassin's Creed 1 a lot, but I didn't know you could assassinate with a hidden blade if the taunting. That is new. I might have to test this. So you've
It's awesome,
actually
isn't it? I'm the same,
opened my
Declan.
eyes. But
Yeah, I can't remember where, somewhere in the run, because I completed that run like months and months and months ago at this point, but somewhere in the run I did do it. I don't remember where it is, but I did use that technique at some point. I want to say, and you guys feel free, or anyone that listens to this, feel free to go look, and I don't remember what sequence it's in, or memory block, I mean, but it's, there's like a guy, and he's about to execute, like a woman, another guy, and one of your assassins. They're all kind of up on stage, and you're in the crowd, and you have to like come in and try and assassinate him. And I want to say it's when that happened, that point in the run, whenever that was, that is where I got that off successfully.
that's pretty good. I think the one question I did actually want to ask you, and I did see it in your big Reddit post, and I really want to know how you managed to do the no damage run with Assassin's Creed 1, mainly on the camera, because AC1's camera, especially with combat, in my opinion, especially on console, and in console you are used to the right analog stick directing the camera, but it's so finicky. If you check my Twitter when I've done 2-minute clips of me stealth assassinate guys in AC1 for fun, the camera either gets locked in a bush or in a wall, and it just gets so finicky and weird.
Yeah, and so for everyone listening, and for you, you two, every run that I did was with mouse and keyboard. I'm very much a PC player. I'm not a very hard console player, which is kind of funny because right now I'm working on Spider-Man PS4. um, and yeah, so everything I did was with mouse and keyboard because that's where I'm comfortable. And for other reasons, it makes practicing a lot easier when you can just like save a file, like save a save file somewhere and just load it back in, instead of kind of going through the monotony that you have to do with consoles sometimes, to make save states. But camera on mouse, it was exactly what you were experiencing is what I experienced too. On mouse, it's a little bit better, but not by a lot. And so really what it boiled down to was every step of the way, speaking for Assassin's Creed 1, every step of the way that is scripted. Everywhere I go, everything I touch, everything I do. There's one section where it got messed up. I can't remember where it was, but I was like running for my life. I got spotted when I shouldn't have gotten spotted, and I didn't have a backup plan. So I was just running for the sake of running and trying to hide. That was not planned, but 99.9% of that run is planned. So everywhere I stand, I already know, ahead of time how the camera's going to react, and kind of how I should angle things. So that definitely helped out, is having it all scripted more or less.
I think what you've said there about your preparation just makes it even more impressive. I will just say on the camera point that you said a moment ago, Declan, that's what I noticed a lot with my replay of AC2 that I finished just last week. So, like you, Hayete, I'm mostly a PC gamer. I do have a PS5 here, and I'm currently kicking the arse out of Horizon Forbidden West. And I've always found the few times I've used a controller until recently, it's always felt like writing with my other hand. But of course, with time and training, you get used to it, and I've been getting more and more comfortable with the controller for the PS5. So I thought I'm going to go back to AC2, but just to try and mix it up, because apparently these games were kind of designed for controllers first. I will replay AC2 with a controller, and yet in some ways it does feel a lot more natural, and the parkour seems to sort of flow better. But that point on the kind of action camera, I totally agree with. This is what I miss from the mouse. So the way that I play is as soon as I know that the character is doing a move, and let's say I'm in a melee, what I will usually do is, whilst that animation is playing where they're kind of finishing the move, I will move the camera around so I can see, right, where are the enemies, where are the guards, what do I need to do? Do I need to sort of prepare a dodge? Can I get an attack in or whatever? But I found with like the action camera in AC2, and you just can't move the stick fast enough to reposition the camera. So I really missed that fine control of the mouse. I mean, it wasn't a big issue. I enjoyed the game a lot. Of course, I wasn't going for any kind of challenge run, but yeah, I did miss my mouse at certain points in my playthrough. Over to you, Hayate.
Yeah, no, James, it sounds like you're thinking like a no damage challenge runner there, man. You're like, I
Oh
can say,
no,
while
no.
while they're finishing their last attack, it gives me enough time to not worry about that, and I could turn the camera. That's challenge running.
I tell you, that's me. I love these games, right? I have a lot of fun playing them. I don't consider myself to be especially skilled, but it was Unity that taught me that, because Unity does have some very long animations, and it can be quite slow. Arno can sometimes be unresponsive, and it was Unity that taught me, right, you've got an animation running, quick, move the camera, reposition, do a quick sort of 360 to scope out where the bad guys are. So yeah, getting better slowly. With age, my brain slows down. What can I say?
No, I fully understand. I'm 35 myself, and I'm an engineer in real life, which is what I kind of blame the challenge
Ah,
running thing on. I say, I'm an
precision.
engineer, and that's why I like doing these. But I honestly feel anybody can do challenge runs. It's more of a mental game than anything else, because you have to go into it being okay and accepting that you will fail 99% of the time. And I have a lot of friends back when I was streaming on Twitch. I don't really stream anymore just because my daughter's 3.5, and we were talking before the show about that. And you can relate to some of the challenges therein. Then with
Oh
full time
yes.
job, and it doesn't leave a whole lot of time to kind of say, okay, every day I'm going to block these 4 hours out in the evening. It's hard to keep a schedule. But I met a lot of people that started challenge running because they saw me or were already challenge running, and we just kind of made friends. And a big portion of their frustrations and them having to take breaks and stop challenge running and things like that is because of that mental aspect. It's very hard to fail in something you're trying to do for enjoyment all the time, especially in runs like this, where and for most of my no damage career, I did Fallen Order, any percent, which I think was like 6 hours or 7 hours. Then I did 100%, which took me 7 months and ended up being 12 plus hours. And then Control, Batman Arkham Knight, et cetera, et cetera. Most of the things I've done are 5 hours, 4 hours, or whatever. So it's really hard mentally to get to the very end of it, and then something happened, and then you lose that run, and you're like, wow, like mentally challenge running is very difficult. But I honestly think if somebody can get over that and they're okay with that, like kind of living in that environment, anybody can challenge run. It's really just looking at it in an objective way, and really kind of the rules that I built when I started challenge running were, you look at things for how far can I push the risk down. So making something as least risky as possible, and then making sure that it's consistent and repeatable. And I know consistent and repeatable sound like I'm saying the same thing, but I'm not. Consistent being that you can do it over and over again. You're capable of doing it over and over again at a high skill level. And then repeatability being that the game's RNG is not a problem. Like that guard will always be there, and then that next guard will always be here, or something like that. Which in Assassin's Creed games is not always the case. So.
On about challenge runs, and this probably doesn't count or sound flashy, but a lot of people have talked about how stealth in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is broken from launch. I have had made it my mission till stealth got fixed this year, so I can't do it anymore. To challenge run with stealth, like people say it's broken and stealth's new and impossible in Valhalla, but since launch, I have made it my mission to a personal challenge run to stealth everything as best as possible. And the only rules I've ever set is detection fails completely, even if it's just a spot. and you only can use bow and a hidden blade, and very difficult, but setting personal challenge runs is actually kind of hilarious to do, especially in Valhalla when stuff is broken. James?
Valhalla stealth. I was just going to say, but I mean, I know there was a major title update, probably, I forget, time flies, 3 or 4 months ago, with a lot of stealth fixes, and it certainly seems to be better. But I found Valhalla stealth to be effectively unusable, at least on launch. maybe starting a new game now, you'd get a very different experience. Do you know, I was going to ask Hayete a question, and I've completely forgotten my point. Hayete, did you want to say something, mate?
Yeah, let me talk on the stealth thing, because people call me a mad lad for doing what I've done. I would never do that. That sounds brutal. I don't know that I would ever try and full stealth the game, just because the stealth is, it's very, very RNG reliant. So a really good example, and you'll have to forgive me, all these games kind of blend after a while, so I don't remember a lot of the names in the areas. But there's kind of late towards the game, I'd say 60% on, somewhere in that range of the story for Valhalla, you have to tail one of these guys kind of through the city, and he leads you to a camp, right? And so then you go in there, you kind of go into this building and you talk to the guy, and basically it doesn't matter what you say, he tries to fight you, right? And then you got to get out. And so I started working on Valhalla No Damage when the game launched. So the game launched, I played it on stream as a first play, and then started working on strategies for the No Damage run. So that run was in the works, however long ago the game came out. And so I've had this strategy that has been just gorgeous. It's a beautiful strategy. It's absolutely brilliant for like 93% of the strategy. The 7% is in the last seconds of you getting to and killing the guy, where the game just doesn't seem to be consistent. And so essentially this guy leads you to the bridge of the, fortified encampment. And so I run counterclockwise around the outer wall, and I go to the backside, I climb up, and there's like a rope that goes to a tree, and then you can go from the tree into the back of the building. You can shoot the panel in the back of the building and then climb in the building and drop in. And there's always 2 guards that'll be off to your left at the point where I climb up. I've had those guards completely ignore me. I've had one of them see me. I've had both of them see me, and I've done nothing wrong, or nothing different. It's always been consistent on my end, but the repeatability on the game's end has always been different. Unfortunately, that was the best strategy that was available and the least risky way to approach it. So I just had to live with it. And then when you get inside to kill the guy, basically what I would do, and one of the things I mentioned in the write-ups that I do for each of the games, is I like to tell people, hey, these are the things that you really want to get because they're so amazing to have as utility, right? Whether that's a smoke bomb or rope dart or whatever, right? For Valhalla, it is 100% the sleep arrow. 100%. That ability will make your playthrough a billion times easier and give you so much more option to a given scenario on how to approach it. So as soon as the guy would go in to fight at me, I would pull that ability, shoot it into the ground, and it would put him to sleep, and I would assassinate him before he could even really react and fall to the ground. And then I would climb back out and leave. All of that got messed up. In fact, it got so messed up that enemies came through the door, which they rarely did. It's not that I had never seen that happen. It was like 5% of the time, something very, very low. And they just, on this playthrough, they just happened to come through the door. And so then I'm kind of like freaking out and dodging. And then I ran out of stamina at one point, and I was like, there goes the run. That's a bunch of hours wasted. And luckily I didn't get hit, but that's a very good example of what I said earlier between consistency and repeatability, and the repeatability of stealth in this game is just all over the place. So trying to do like a whole playthrough on stealth, I salute you and tip my hat at you, sir, because I wouldn't dare try that.
So if he comes back to us sort of gone completely crazy, then we'll know that it's not.
Yeah, he was doing like all stealth run.
To be honest, sorry, James, I know you've about to say something.
No, go on, mate.
I was just gonna say, I did manage to do the whole. I am actually planning on re-downloading it and doing a new game from scratch to 100% do a stealth run. My stealth run through Valhalla at the moment is at 95% because of the unpredictability of some of the AI. There's been times where I've noticed if you shoot an arrow to the left when two guards are standing, one will check the noise, so you can easily assassinate one, then do the throw-in axe ability to chain assassination. Sometimes they both check the arrow, which gets really confusing, or sometimes none of them check the arrow and then you're totally screwed. So, but with the new systems, I think I may re-download Valhalla at one point and try and 100% of the game using stealth where possible. Because I know some
Yeah, where
missions you
possible
can't.
is a good idea.
Yeah, some missions you can't,
I was
especially
going to
with, like,
say
Odin
you'd have to make
fights.
an allowance for those for the big set piece like fort. I can't think of the right word. The capture the fort missions right at the end of every major arc. You'd have to. You
You
can't stealth those
you
because you're
can
permanently detected. Surely.
you can stealth them a little bit. There is actually a way. Um,
Okay.
it's glitched, very glitched and very broken. I have actually lost 2 hours because of this. But in the first one, what I've noticed is the AI is stupid in Valhalla at times. No offense. So they'll attack your attacking party. So you can theoretically bypass 90% just by running along the edges of the encampment, and you can actually get behind the gate. And sometimes, again, as Hayete says, it's unpredictability. The guards won't see you drop behind the gate, so you can open the gate, jump in a bush, everybody will rush and start fighting, and then in the chaos you can just keep repeating, and it does work. I'm gonna say 1 out of 100 times.
1 out of 100? That is
Yes.
that's bad probability.
I think I've tried all of them, this strategy, and I think there's about 7 of them I can't remember off the top of my head. And bearing in mind for my challenge run, I would save at the start of each one and then test out. And if it was impossible because of how broken stuff was, I would class that as a complete fail because of the game mechanics. But if it was doable without mistakes, I kind of find that some of them were doable without mistakes. You just needed that slow down time ability, because once you've got that, you can literally one-shot nearly everybody without ever being caught. So that's sweet. The miasma ability on the skill tree makes using poison, predator arrows, leech poison onto loads of others, so you may kill one, not get detected, but it passes poison to everyone else, so they all just start dropping like flies.
Yeah, that's one of my criticisms with Valhalla and really a lot of the RPG trilogy is, a lot of what you're saying there would not have worked for me, simply because of the difficulty. Like on Aesir, eh, on Acer, unless you're kind of doing like a new game plus hack where you kind of start the game with, 400 or whatever points to kind of put into the game, really your only way to remove enemies quickly is to just assassinate them, which is one of the reasons why you were talking about or it sounded like you were talking about when you do like raids, right? And you would kind of send your people in and then you would just kind of move through the chaos and they would ignore you. I actually took the complete opposite approach for no damage, where there is not a single point in my run where you're required to raid with your people that I didn't go forward of them and kill everyone. And then once the area was clear, then bring them in to bash through the doors that I couldn't do without them. And that was just for consistency's sake. Going into an area and I know that there's enemies here. I know this enemy's here. I know that one's going to be pathing around here. And so I know how to approach it. So for example, say the very first one that you do when you're setting up Ravensthorpe, right? So if you look at my run, I get to the point where you're told to go and do that raid. And then I go away for I don't know, 45 minutes to get abilities. Right. And then I come back. And when I go to do that raid, I know that the first 2 guys coming up from the landing, I'm going to sleep arrow both of those. I'm going to assassinate them and another guy's going to come around. And then I'm going to assassinate that guy. And then I'm going to go into the brush or the wheat field or whatever they had there, the crops. And I'm just going to whistle and call each guy that's forward of me. There's usually 3. Call each one of those over one at a time and assassinate them. And then once those are done, there's going to be 2 guys sitting at the church. I'm going to sleep arrow both of those guys. I'm going to go kill them. And then I'm going to run around, counterclockwise on the outside of the wall to where the heavy concentration of enemies are on basically the northeast side of that area as I approached it. And then I'm going to go into the wheat field or whatever there, and I'm going to whistle those guys in and kill them one at a time. And then I'm going to run off to my right and kill the last guy. And then I'm going to run forward and use my horn and call everybody in, and then finish the 2 guys that are in the building. So like being able to make a strategy and have it be repeatable and consistent like that I can literally verbatim tell you how it would go, was more useful to me than calling my guys in and kind of dealing with the chaos, if that makes sense. So it's really interesting to see how different people approach that kind of stuff, at least on my end.
It's just fascinating to hear your strategies that you worked out for each sequence or each location. It really is. I want to go back a little bit then, and let's go back to the start of this run. So could you talk us through what ground rules did you set yourself, in terms of what would be allowed, what wouldn't be allowed? Did you use New Game Plus where you could? Did you rule out or rule in certain skills or abilities? Talk us through the rules.
Sure. So one of the things I like to do for any game that I challenge run is I don't like to, I'm going to use a blanket statement. I don't like to use speed run rules, meaning that you can go out of bounds, you can glitch the game, you can break the game, you can do all kinds of things. Essentially, I don't like to avoid risk or instances where I could take damage. I like my runs to be something that somebody could look at and say, I've played through this game. I know this game inside and out. I've played through this story. And I don't know how the hell you would get past this without no damage. And then I say, let me show you. Right? Instead of glitching out of bounds and going around it. So one of the things I do not like to do on any run is glitch. So that's part of it. I do not like to take damage unless it's absolutely 100% avoidable. And there are some instances where it's like, okay, well, you could not take damage on this, but you would have to do this kind of exploit. I don't like to do that. So if it's developer intended, I allow it. So one that just comes off the top of my head in Assassin's Creed Revelations, I think it's sequence 6 or 7. But you go to the city, the village or whatever that's kind of in the mountain, right? You sail there and you go inside. And then at the end of it, the whole place is burning down. You're running for your life and you start taking smoke inhalation damage. That damage doesn't count. That's developer intended. And from my understanding, there is a way you could glitch out of it. But like I said before, I don't like doing that. So things like that, I let those be, okay damage to take. But anything where it's really in the control of the player, where the developer has said, your fate's up to you, kid, go do what you're going to do, I am not allowed to take damage. So that's the basis for any game I do, whether it's Assassin's Creed or anything else. So obviously for Assassin's Creed, basically other than Odyssey, every single game has force damage on you at some point. But once I got past, I think it was Revelations, and I started with AC3. AC3 was the first one that introduced ship combat. I tried a lot of ideas and various mechanics and things at least I could think of to see if there was a way to do ship combat without taking damage. And it became very apparent to me that the ship combat in AC3, in Black Flag, and in Rogue were not designed in a way that would allow you to do that. We were talking before the show about the mermaid strat, right? Which I had never heard of, which is really cool. So I'll let you guys explain that to everybody listening. But, and it's funny because that's exactly what I did in Odyssey for ship combat.
That's what I enjoyed a lot in Odyssey as well. It's funny when Declan mentioned it, because although I quite enjoyed Odyssey ship combat, it was way into my hundreds and hundreds of hours of Odyssey time that I thought, what happens if Cassandra just dives off the boat and swims over? And it was like, this is awesome. No risk, just get in there. Anyway, so it was great to hear from Declan that it was possible in the earlier games.
Yeah, unfortunately, in Black Flag, to use that one, there's so many instances that are scripted where, the very last one, where you're kind of chasing Bartholomew, right? And one of the strategies I used in that is a speedrunning strategy. It is literally the best strategy for that. And in fact, I would not have been able to get this run and I say in as fast as I got it because it took 9 hours. I would not have been able to get that run in 9 hours without using that strategy, because I would have had to go back and upgrade the health of my ship so much more than it was. But there are certain instances in the game where the game forces you to take damage on the ship, and it happens so often. And, for example, when you're dealing with a fort, right? You have to take down the defenses of a fort. How do you do that without taking any damage? Especially when there's other ships firing at you. So you've got mortars coming in and there's other ships firing at you. So it just became very evident to me very early on that ship combat in those games were just going to have to be allowable. And I kind of rationalized it. Like if I was on a ship and it took a shot to the bow and I wasn't at the bow, I wouldn't be hurt, right? So that's okay. So that's kind of how I rationalized it. And the same thing for, say, Assassin's Creed 2 or Brotherhood, in the various parts where you're escorting people, you're escorting your family members and they take damage, or you're riding around in a carriage, shooting at enemies on horseback and the carriage takes damage, right? Should that count against you? No, it shouldn't, because there's no way for you to avoid it. It's a given mechanic that the developers intended. So for my rule set for those games, it was basically if I took damage to my character's health and it wasn't developer intended, it would count against me. And then for the RPG trilogy, you asked about New Game Plus. So I did New Game Plus on Origins and on Odyssey just to reduce the amount of time that it would take. Unfortunately, Valhalla, I couldn't do that. But when I had done a run on Twitch a long time ago, before I ever thought about doing the whole series No Damage, where I said, okay, I'm going to do a level 1 no hit run without New Game Plus. And I went with it, and it took me like 19 hours or something crazy like that. And I completed it. I think it was 3 hits. And I said, I never want to do that again. That was too long.
So you played the whole of Valhalla's main story in 19 hours at the power level of 1. So
Odyssey, but yes.
Oh,
yes,
sorry, Odyssey. Wow.
Yeah. So I put on
amazing.
I think it was the so you have 2 sets you can pick up via the shop or via the trader or whatever if you kind of grind it out. But there's one for Sparta and there's one for Athens. And the one for Athens is kind of white and it's got gold on it and stuff like that. I was wearing that and I just left it at level 1 because, at the very start of the game, they kind of give you whatever's on your account, right?
Yes.
So I put all of that on and I gave myself level 1 weapons and whatever. And then I went and I did the whole game, and it took me 19 hours because it literally took forever to kill anything because you're at level 1 and everything else is above you, right? So it was miserable. And I said, I never want to do that again. So when I started doing the no damage runs, I was like, I'm going to do it on New Game Plus. I'm going to make a build that I can explain to with some caveats. And that way, it makes it manageable. Origins was like 4 hours. Odyssey was 5 hours. Obviously Valhalla was 17 and a half, and nothing you can do about that, right? But for example, in Origins, I made a rule that I wasn't going to put more points in to mastery than what the max level was. So max level in that game is 55. I could put as many points as I want, infinitely so, right? And it would make the game trivial. And so I just picked an arbitrary baseline. I said the max level you can go is 55. Let's just keep everything at 55. So that's what I ended up doing for that. So for Odyssey, there wasn't really anything like that. I think I didn't put points in, God, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but you can go in and put like 20 points into so many different
the mastery
categories.
Levels. Yes.
Yeah.
You can really heavily customize your characters.
Right.
So armor and damage and so on. Yeah.
Right. So I didn't put anything into that would give me like a significant bonus. And I did that because I wanted it to still be challenging. I felt like if I just put a bunch of points in everything for that, it would make it kind of easy.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I didn't do that. So for the New Game Plus, there were some caveats similar to those. But again, the baseline rules of, don't take damage unless it's forced on you. And for ship combat in Origins, they have a mechanic that you can not take damage. So there's no way for me to justify taking damage on the ship when the developers gave me the mechanic to avoid it. So for Origins, it wasn't allowed. For Odyssey, it wasn't allowed because we could do this mermaid technique of swimming over and boarding the ship and fighting everyone. So I want to say that was the baseline for the entire series, the rule set. So I know that was a little long-winded, but hopefully it answered pretty much everything you're looking for.
No, it's great. And just to clarify to people, if you took damage, whether it was in the very first memory sequence or the very final mission, what did you do?
Restart the entire game. So there's a sect of challenge running that allow for like save state reloads, right? And I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. I think they call them segmented runs, where basically you go through a segment without taking damage, and then the next segment you go through that one without taking damage. If you take damage, you reload that segment and you keep doing it, and over time you'll get through it, right?
Yeah.
But you're allowed to reload. I don't like doing that. I feel like a no damage run should truly be no damage from the start to the end for everything that's in your control. So if I take damage anywhere in a run, which is why Valhalla was so painful, because there were quite a few times where I would take damage at like the very last section, which is very chaotic. And then you're like, wow, that's 16 hours. That sucks. Restart, delete it, and start all over again.
Was there one thing that popped out to me when I was reading your game summaries was Brotherhood took you 43 hours. I think that's right.
Sure. I don't remember off the top of my head.
It surprised me as being, it's one of the shorter games, especially compared to the RPG games. But what was it about Brotherhood that took you so long? Was there some RNG crept in, or there's just one level that's very hard to script for and practice for? What was it about Brotherhood that was unusual?
Yeah, so there were two, and the second one is kind of multiple parts. So the first one was sequence 4. So you get this, mission or quest or whatever you want to call it, where you have to go and break Katarina out of prison or wherever she's being held.
In the Castello, yes.
Right. So when you're leaving that area, Ezio's like, go, I'll distract them, right? And then you're surrounded by just a crap ton of guys and various types, from like your standard ground troop to the guys with the heavy axes, the halberds, and those things. And those were difficult because the heavy enemies, the technique that I decided to use was anytime you had a heavy, you would go barehanded and you would just take their weapon from them and then insta kill them with it. So anytime there was a heavy, basically I had to put my weapon away. And that presents its own challenges because, same as in Assassin's Creed 1 and Assassin's Creed 2, there's different timing, as we talked earlier in the show. There's different timings to get these things right for what I call perfect parries, right, or perfect counters. So it made it a little bit more difficult, but just the sheer number of how many enemies were there made it difficult. And the thing that ultimately made it such a pain was that when the timer runs out, because you're basically sitting there for like 2 minutes or something, I can't remember, but when the timer runs out, a cutscene takes place. If an enemy is attacking you at the moment that cutscene comes in, you will take damage. And there's nothing you can do to stop it because you no longer have control over Ezio. So it took me a while to figure out how to deal with that and the timing on that. And basically what it turned out to be was, in the last couple of seconds of the timer, I just start throwing smoke bombs down and make sure I'm standing right up against my escape route. That way, as I go into the cutscene, the enemy AI is stunned from the smoke bomb, and that buys me enough time to skip the cutscene, come out of it, and then move on without being in danger. So that was the first one. The second one was basically every single Apple of Eden area. So as I said earlier in the rule set, right? to use the apple of Eden, it takes from your life to do damage to enemies. So obviously that's taking damage, but it's not counted against you because it's a mechanic that the developers intend for you to continue the story. The problem therein is that you can't do anything. You can't block, you can't dodge, you can't guard, you can't really parkour. You're just bound to that one singular plane of moving left, right, forward, down, whatever. And you've got archers shooting at you in one of the sections. And because the enemy AI never reacted or responded exactly the same way every single time, it put this element of RNG into the strategy that I couldn't avoid. And this is at the very end of the game. This is sequence 8. So, you would do 4 hours or whatever work, you would get up to this point, and then you would just roll the dice and hope that you got through it. So, a part of the reason why I was able to do it so fast was because I got so good at failing at the end that everything that came before it, I was so good at. So I was able to get through everything before it relatively easily, get up 4 hours or whatever it was into that point, roll the dice. And, one of the times I made it and was able to get through the whole thing. So that became the run that got uploaded.
Amazing. It really is amazing. Did you, when you were planning each strategy, I think you've kind of covered this, but did you try to stay undetected as much as possible to make it easier, or were you happy to mix it up and throw in melee combat because melee can be enjoyable as well?
Yeah, so one of my rules, and I guess I didn't cover this, is, and a lot of people get this wrong, to include, if anybody goes to Google and types in black flag, no damage, there, when I did the black flag run, that thing blew up so incredibly, compared to all the other runs I had done before, that I wasn't prepared. Various news, gaming news sites were writing articles on it, and people were messaging me and all this kind of stuff. And they were basically presenting me as a speedrunner. Speedrunner did this, speedrunner completed this, speedrunner. And I'm like, I'm not a speedrunner. And that's one of the things that's kind of challenging is people think what I'm doing is for time. And on my end, time is never a factor. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how silly it looks. All that I care about is reduction in risk, repeatability, and consistency, like I said earlier. So, for strategy, it really, for me, comes down to what works the best. If that's stealthing, which 9 times out of 10 it is, that's what I'm going to go with. If it's being aggressive or running past enemies, which some areas require in some of these games, then that's what I do. It really depends. It's what's best and what's least risky for any given section of the game. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Which one thing I wanted to clarify. Again, I read all your stuff over the last couple of days, but again, it's all a bit mushed up in my head. So you didn't just go for no damage. You went for full sync on the main story missions as well.
Right. So this came from like me researching, right? So part of the process, I don't think we've really touched on this yet, but part of my process in no damaging a game is saying, okay, let me play through it once just as like a casual playthrough. I'm just playing it for familiarization, right? Like I said earlier, there were a couple of the games I had never played before. That was my first time ever touching them. So, just play it as a gamer, enjoy the story, do whatever you want, just have fun with it, right? So I do that, and while I'm doing that, I'm like, okay, I took damage here. I think I get what that is. Okay, this is developer force damage. I'll obviously make a rule that doesn't count. So as I'm playing through it casually, I kind of in my mind suss out what's going to be the trouble areas. On a second playthrough, I go through it specifically to address anything that I felt was an issue and start to kind of see what I could make out of that. What could I strategize around? Is it maybe having better gear would help? Is it maybe having a better utility or tool like a smoke bomb or a rope dart or whatever? Would that help? Things like that. On a third playthrough, I go through and make save states for everything and decide basically where my breakpoints are going to be in the run. Because one of the things that I don't do, if it's not obvious from like the Valhalla one, for example, I'm not sitting in the chair for 17 and a half hours. I have a daughter, I have a wife, and a full-time job. I just can't do that, which is one of the reasons why I stopped streaming. So I have to have breakpoints where, okay, I go say 3 hours and, right at the end to say this sequence, I'm going to stop. That's where that recording will be cut and it will be done. And then the next section will be this. And I go, and if I take damage, then anything I recorded goes in the recycle bin and I start again, right? We already covered that. So, on the third playthrough, I go through and I make save states so that I can practice any areas that might be troublesome or that I'm really having a hard time with, and look for where those breakpoints are going to be. And then after that, it's just doing the run. So the general way that I do a run is I make it iterative. So I don't try and go through an entire run altogether. I use those breakpoints that I made and say, okay, I'm going to do this first 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever that arbitrary number is. And I'm going to keep doing it over and over and over and over again until I get it no damage. And then once I feel like, okay, I really understand this, now I can record it, right? And then, over time you would do, let's say there's 3 parts, right? So part A, part B, part C. So I do part A over and over and over again until I'm like, okay, I got it. Then I do part B over and over again until I got it. And then C. And then once I feel like I've got the whole game, then I'm like, okay, now I can hit record. So then I hit record and we, go through the whole game until eventually I get the run, whenever that happens to be. So that's kind of the process I go through to do these runs. And, I might be off on a tangent now, but that's kind of the foundation of any run that I do, is set and molded out of that mold, so to speak.
It makes a lot of sense, because when you explain it that way, it's so clear, because you'd run the risk of, because you always reset your progress to 0 if you take damage, you run the risk of learning the early parts of the game incredibly well, but then you get to sequence 12 or 14 and you've never done it before. And therefore your risk of failure goes significantly higher. So it makes a hell of a lot of sense to really break it down like that and practice, and then you go for your clean run through the game. Declan, you wanted to say something, mate?
I forgot.
I talked too long. He forgot.
No, I found it. So while you were talking, I was actually got very interested, and I did do some Googling because I'm professional. How long did it actually take you for Black Flag? Because I found an article from Screen Rant that says you've done it under 10 hours. But then it also mentions something about 250 hours, so I'm confused. How long did it actually take?
Yeah. So the 250 hours is basically how long it took me from my first playthrough until I got the run completed. In first playthrough, I played Black Flag when it first came out, whenever that was. But, from when I was like, okay, I'm done with AC3, now I'm on AC4, I booted it up and went through the process I just explained, right? Casual playthrough for familiarization, all that kind of stuff. So from that first playthrough until I got the run that's now on YouTube was about 250 hours. I think it was like 257 or something. I rounded it down. And then the 9 hours is how long the run is. Like the actual video up on YouTube is like 9 hours and some change for me to no damage that game.
This is insane. Like, I will get bored. I'm a very casual gamer, so I'm not good at maths. So please, anybody correct me on maths. But with kid life, I probably do about 2 hours a night. So if I was to try and do a 250-hour playthrough, and someone will have to correct me, at 2 hours a night, that's what, like 125 days to try and practice a no damage run? That's insane.
Yeah, it's and that's one of the reasons why, like, I tried streaming like early on. I tried streaming I think it was Assassin's Creed. I told you I did Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and then I was going to do Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And it became very apparent to me that I had the wrong community for that. They were not at all interested um, in those games, mostly because of how much like point A to point B, like running you do, right? So I found really quickly that I was able to get more time in not streaming than streaming. Because the way I used to do my runs, for example, when I did Jedi Fallen Order, was that was a 3-day run. It was basically a 2-day run if I went over, but I usually did 4 hours a day when I was streaming. And so it would be about a 3-hour run because you're interacting, you're talking, you're taking breaks and doing those type of things. And, so like if I was not streaming on a day and I was like, I really want to do this run, I'm 3 hours into it and I really want to do this run, I couldn't because I didn't want to do it and then be successful at it and not have people there to see it. I feel like I would be detracting from their participation in it. So when I decided to fully stop streaming for like IRL reasons, I found, like I said earlier, that I had just had so much time, extra time, I can get an hour in here. I can get 45 minutes in here. So that's, like I said, it's not where I sit down and I'm going through, say, Black Flag for 9 hours. It would be impossible. I don't have the bandwidth to do that in my real life, surrounded by all the responsibilities I have. So it's really like going through it in pieces, and you're building to this perfect run. And then when you get that perfect run, you put it all together, and then that's what's being presented, to whoever ends up watching it.
That's pretty insane. I do want to say, like, I kind of agree with the whole Twitch thing. I know this is like off topic, but I'm trying to do a little bit of Twitch streaming on top of the podcasting, and I'm playing Elden Ring. And the other night, I was like, oh, I'll go just practice one of the bosses, see what it's like. I accidentally killed the boss on my first try, and I was like, oh, I should have done that on stream.
Yep.
I was like, oh, that feels so bad. But I wanted to test the mechanics, see the timing, and just actually wailing on it and watching it just die in 2 hits. I was like, stupid.
Do you have on the Xbox? You get this on my PC and I'm sure it's the same with AMD, but with the NVIDIA tools, you've got an instant replay. So it's basically permanently recording your screen. And if something cool happens in a game, I can just hit Alt-Z, tap a button, and it will save the last, whatever it is, X minutes of gameplay. Is there nothing like that on Xbox where you can just quickly capture those epic moments?
Not that I know of.
All right. Bit of homework for you, mate. There must be.
Must be. But
I want to say there is. There's a couple of people I know on Twitch that do Fallen Order, like challenge runs. And they do them on, I believe one of them does it on Xbox, and he clips things sometimes. I could be wrong, but I think there's a function like that.
There probably is. I'm just a dum-dum that doesn't know. Like, I didn't even know I could stream from my Xbox to
Well, I mean, to be fair, what you're describing is Twitch is very much like an entertainment thing. You're there for your community more so than you're kind of there for yourself. Which when I went to basically full-time just YouTube, doing my own thing and uploading it, that's a completely different environment. It's all about you at that point, and then what you're doing, and then you upload, and you're able to interact on whatever that upload is. So I think exactly what you're saying is, it sucks when you're trying to practice something or do something, and then you screw it up, and you're like, man, I bet everybody would have loved to see that.
I know that feeling. Listen, I want to ask a couple of kind of very. You're never supposed to ask closed questions when you do these things. Open question was best, but I've got a couple of closed questions. So, which game took the most attempts to get the perfect run, and which game took the fewest attempts?
So Valhalla took the most,
really?
just because of the sheer length of the game.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of challenge runners that like write notes down. They'll have like a document that has like, hey, remember this, at this point, do this or whatever. I don't do that. I like to memorize everything. Now, granted, I brain dump a lot of it as soon as I get a run done, but while I'm focused on a run, I want all of it, every detail to be in my brain. I don't want to have to rely on something else. So just the sheer volume and size of that game and its main story is what the strongest reason for why I'm saying Valhalla. It basically, like I said, from the time the game came out until I got it, I wasn't working on it every day, daily. I was doing other no damage runs and things like that. But I never stopped working on it. So that one took the longest for sure. The quickest one, the quickest one. I don't know. I want to say it's a tie up between Origins and Odyssey. I've played Odyssey more than any other AC game. So my familiarization with that one was very, very high. Origins went really fast because I was doing it on New Game Plus, and the story compared to the other ones, Odyssey and Valhalla, is shorter. I want to let's say Origins, even though Origins was a pain in the ass for a big reason.
Tell us more. We need to know more.
Yeah. So Origins, and I put this in my write-up for Origins, and I know I'm gonna piss a lot of people off because I know Origins is a fan favorite. Origins is probably, in fact, on my rankings, I think I had it as like one of the lowest games, if not the lowest game. And it's simply because of the dodge mechanic. The dodge mechanic in that game is very, very bad. It's very bad. So in a lot of games, you get what I call iframes, or what the community calls iframes. Iframes just stands for invincibility frames. And what that means is at the time you do whatever that is, the developers have hard-coded your health bar to not be affected by damage. So for example, in Dark Souls or Jedi Fallen Order, of any of those type of games, say when you dodge roll as the roll animation is happening, you have iframes. You cannot be damaged. And in AC Origins, there are no iframes. And to make it worse...
Hang on a minute. There are no iframes in Origins?
Not that I could detect, no. There are no iframes in Origins. And
Isn't
to make
that
it
one of the basic components, and again, I'm no expert here, isn't that a basic component of a hitbox combat system? That sounds amazing. Well,
so for game developers, generally they add a type of iframe to any kind of dodge system to give the player some time to react. So say, God, I don't even know what to use as an example. Say an enemy hits the ground, there's a big explosion, right? But you dodge rolled that hit, the iframes would protect you from the explosion thereafter far enough so you could get out of the proximity of it, just using an arbitrary example. Right? Yeah. There was none of that I could detect in Origins. And the thing that made it worse is that the dodge system is cut up into 3 parts. And to make it even worse than that, those 3 parts are all variable. So if you've played Origins, which I'm sure most people that are going to listen to this have, you hit the dodge button once, he dodges, you do it again, he slides, you do it again, he rolls, right? The problem with that is 1, you have no iframes, like I said. 2, that first dodge is, say, half a meter. Then the next one is, say, a quarter of a meter. And then the next, the dodge roll itself is a meter, right? So there's variable distances that each one of those dodge components will carry you. And so then you have to work inside of those variable distances while you're trying to avoid variable attacks from enemies. The Septimius fight at the very end with Aya was the single hardest thing in that run. And it was such a pain in the ass because I would get hit and it wasn't my fault. I would get hit because of those variable distances, or because you're trying to hit those 3 inputs. You want to dodge roll, but to get to the roll, you have to do the other 2 before that. And it just made it such a pain, man. It's a very, very bad system, which I believe is why in Odyssey they changed it to a more traditional system where you dodged on a push and you dodge rolled on a hold.
Yeah.
And then the same thing with Valhalla. They never went back to that AC Origins dodge system because it was terrible. And I don't know if they ever publicly said that, but for me, as someone who really breaks games down at their core mechanical level, that would be my reasoning as to why they never revisited that dodge system, is because it's bad. It's very, very bad.
I definitely again this was I'm trying to think when I first played Origins 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I like to think my general knowledge of how games work and how to play games has improved a lot since then. I came back to gaming, 3.5 years ago after many years break. So I kind of missed a lot of stuff. But anyway, I definitely found Origins melee combat to be hard is the wrong word because I probably didn't spend enough time understanding it, but I found it to be generally unsatisfying. Whether that's because I needed to be more accurate with my timing, or like you said, the dodge doesn't seem to work. It's the Odyssey's dodge system, very simple, like you described, and it just feels intuitive, like it makes sense. Short dodge, long dodge, simple. But yeah, I found Origins melee combat to be just strange. But I'd like to go back to it actually with everything I've learned in the last few years and just see, do I enjoy it more? Am I able to unpick it the way you've described and really get into it?
Yeah, Origins was a frustrating game. I mean, one of the, and I don't think I mentioned this when we were talking about rule set. One of my rule set for anything that had a difficulty was I had to do it on the hardest difficulty, which is one of the reasons why, I decided to do full synchronization, because I saw nobody had done that, and I thought that would be cool and would make it difficult, being that those games didn't have difficulty settings, right? And so for Origins, that was nightmare difficulty. And the problem with nightmare difficulty in Origins, and in Valhalla, is that the game developers did what I call like weak game design. Weak game design is, how do we make something harder? Well, you do less damage and they have more health. It's very lazy design, in my opinion. Not that I have a solution, right? I'm not a game developer, but when you implement a difficulty system like that, and that is your go-to approach, you have to balance what you're doing against what exists. And so, and I forgot to speak on this. I'm glad we kind of jogged my memory on this. So there's a section in Origins where you're with Caesar and you're escaping on the back of a chariot. Everybody will remember this. It's such a key moment, right?
Yes.
You're shooting at enemies chasing you, and then the elephant comes out of nowhere, right? So that whole section is impossible to no damage on Nightmare. It's also impossible to no damage on story mode, or whatever the easiest difficulty was. And I know this because I spent hours, guys, I spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure out how to no damage this section. And it is not possible. If you no damage it, you're lucky. And when I say I spent hours, I mean, I went on YouTube and just typed in that section. I was watching just random people. I was doing research just to see if anyone actually was able to do it. And then, is it something that I missed? Is it something I could replicate? And I couldn't find a single person that got through it without damage on any difficulty. The problem on Nightmare is if you get hit twice, you die. So one of the rules, and I think it's in the description of the Origins video for my no damage run, is that I changed the difficulty from Nightmare on that one section down to the easiest difficulty. And did that so that I couldn't die, because I didn't want to be in this infinite loop of RNG where I could just be dead, and then I would do it again and then die, and then do it again and then die. So I made an allowance for damage in that one section only, and I dropped it from Nightmare to whatever the easiest difficulty was so that I wouldn't die, and that pissed me off. It made me so mad that I had to do that because the developers did not think to balance the gameplay for the system they had implemented on that difficulty.
I feel like you've got another career in games quality testing or something like that. Sorry, mate, Declan, I spoke over you. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I know this is like completely off topic, but I wonder if this is all because technically, I know I argue otherwise, and I still will, but because Origins is the first open world RPG, even though all the other games have had RPG mechanics, that maybe they just struggle to find the balance because it's such a diverse departure from the other franchise because it is classed as a soft reboot. So maybe they just struggled on how do you implement a combat as fluid as Assassin's Creed into a more hitbox based RPG, and especially with missions and the whole damage system. Because we know, looking at how Valhalla does the abilities compared to Odyssey, they kind of take a note that your character doesn't have to be overpowered, they shouldn't be level gating. So maybe some of the problems of Origins is just they didn't know how to make Assassin's Creed work fully open world.
Yeah, and I mean it's an iterative thing, right? They had an idea and they went with it, and I'll never fault anybody for that. The dodge rolling, as much as I hate it in Origins, they tried something. It didn't work. That's fine. It's okay to do that. The chariot section, there's no excuse for that. The simple fix is you allow Bayek to hold a shield.
I
Or
mean, that does
or
it does make a lot of
you,
sense, doesn't
you
it?
allow
Really?
Bayek to duck down, and that duck down mechanic would then avoid fire, avoid arrow strikes. It might not make sense because, the back of the chariot's opening, but for the sake of game development and gameplay, you could say, okay, my archers, the enemies that are attacking Bayek are only allowed to shoot from the top of the chariot up. And if you want to duck down, you can then duck down. The trade-off is you're not able to fire. So then there's a risk versus reward there in that they can do too much damage to the chariot and then you fail that section, right? It's a very simple game design fix. I will not forgive them for that. There is no excuse for that. That section is terrible and was completely overlooked. For the harder difficulties, for the easier difficulties, it's fine. But that's also one of the reasons why I love AC Odyssey. And it's not something that I believe was at the forefront of the Odyssey developers, but it is the only game that does not force damage on you. And as a player who likes to play these, and I know I'm like a niche category of gamer, but I like it when the developers give me something that's hard, but don't restrict me from, they don't force me to take damage. They don't restrict my approach in that. And so that chariot section in Origins will live with me for a long time and will probably always piss me off. So
I'm really sorry to have brought it up.
no, you're fine.
I wanted to ask briefly about Unity and Syndicate. So
Absolutely.
The two sort of I think they're both great games, especially Unity. I love Unity, but you had some interesting commentary on both of them, and I'm fascinated by your comments about Syndicate, because you called out in your sort of final summary post that Syndicate for you was the most buggy game to complete within your constraints, and that was interesting to me because Unity famously is the buggy one in the franchise. And a lot of people will kind of their summary of Syndicate would be it's Unity without the bugs. So could you tell us a bit about Syndicate and what was it specifically that that caused you to call it out as the most buggy game through this playthrough and not Unity, which does have some hilarious random detection issues and so on at certain times?
Yeah, sure. So, and it's funny you say that because I knew when I was writing that what I was saying was not the standard experience. And I still to this day don't understand why it was. I had very few problems with Unity. I think the biggest issue I had was the parkour system would break. And it would break in like the worst freaking ways that would get me hit. And I linked little so like I told you, I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but
Oh, go for it.
Like I told you guys earlier, when I went to YouTube, and then the iterative process of how I do this stuff, a lot of the process gets lost to the viewer that's going to see the final product on YouTube. And one of the things that I started doing, and I think it was around the time of Black Flag, or maybe it was Rogue, was if anything happened that was just like really crazy in a failed attempt, or that got me to take damage and failed an attempt, I would keep that and I would note to clip it, upload it to YouTube, and have it there as evidence of a statement that I was going to make. And so I put that stuff on my Unity and my Syndicate write-ups. And so, if anybody listening to this goes and checks those out, you'll see some of what I'm talking about the parkour breaking in Unity. But that was really the only issues I had in Unity. And I know that the general community experience is not that. They had so much more issues that I never did run into, and I was doing this game for no damage, right? And then I went to Syndicate, and I was like, so let's take the bugs and everything out of it. Out of Syndicate and Unity, Syndicate is my favorite. And it's more so for the mechanical aspect of it than for like narrative or environment or something like that, because they brought Whistle back, which I was like, thank God. Unity without Whistle was miserable. And the thing in Unity that used to drive me crazy was that they were obviously trying to focus on stealth. They really wanted it to be a stealthy, assassin-y game, and yet the way to complete some of the optional objectives, like, hey, kill an enemy from cover, right, is that you have to do something loud or you have to be seen. And I feel like that was a break in game development there. Like somebody had an idea and then the approach were not marrying up properly. So like having a whistle and being able to like get someone to come over to you without having to stand up and be seen, or, use a firecracker, I was like, thank God, right? So like for little things like that, Syndicate is my favorite between the two. But one of the reasons why in my write-up I said that Unity was from that part of it, Unity was higher up on the list, was because I had so many issues with Syndicate. And the biggest one that I had an issue with was in sequence 7. You have to go to I'm gonna butcher the name of this, like Sinopeans, something like that club.
I think it's called the Sinopian Club or something. But
Sinopian,
yes, I know what you mean.
go.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to go to the club and you have to spy on the prime minister, right? And then you have to chase down and tackle this spy once you complete that section. So what was happening to me was the spy would start to run as he was scripted to, and as soon as I would tackle him, he would stand up and nothing would happen. In the challenge running and speed running community, we call that a hard lock. So the game would hard lock on you, meaning there's absolutely nothing you can do other than to restart the game or reload that section to then continue. And so, like I told you guys earlier, one of the things I did not want in my runs was to reload. I didn't want to do that because I feel like if you reload, people were like, oh, okay, well, that kind of, detracts from the authenticity of this or something, right? So I didn't want to reload on this game or this run. So I went to forums, I went to Reddit, I went to the Ubisoft forums, like their support stuff. I went everywhere to figure out how the hell do I stop this from happening? And I ended up finding like a years old post on the Ubisoft forums or whatever that basically said I had to go into the task manager, go into the exe process for Syndicate, and turn the number of cores on the game it was being allowed to use down. So I had to experiment with how many cores would work before the game broke. And so like at 1 core, because I think I had 19. So at 1 core, it was basically like running an animated slideshow. Like the frames were probably like 5 FPS or something. So then I had to do it at 2 cores and then 3 cores. And finally I figured out 4 cores was the Goldilocks area, right? So I would have to, and it's in the run. If you go check it out in the VOD on YouTube, I specifically show people what I'm doing so that they understand. So I bring it up and I change the cores to 4. I get past that little section. I just need the cutscene to happen. And then once the cutscene is done, I pause the game and I change it back. And then I continue. And it's things like that that just made it miserable. Glitching through in sequence 4, the Crate Escape, where you're playing as Evie and you go to this cart or whatever that's surrounded by a bunch of enemies. You look in the back of it and it starts this sequence where Jacob is driving and you got a whole bunch of people chasing you, right? And you're supposed to shoot them, which is not the best strategy. Best strategy, sadly, is to throw knives at the horses. But as you're going through that sequence, if an enemy chariot or carriage happens to ram you, or if Jacob turns a corner and it kind of almost acts like it's going to tip over because he went too fast, for quite a few variables. You can glitch through the bottom of it. And if the cart hits you, you'll take damage for that. Or you'll be on the ground, and because Jacob is too far away from you, you'll desynchronize and fail it, which was also against my rule set. I wasn't allowed to desync. So it was like so many areas like that where it was just, it felt like the game was fighting me. And I know that's not the common experience, but that was my experience. And the only thing I can kind of theorize is my hardware is maybe too good for the game, that the game doesn't know how to support on that hardware. Um, I have a 3080 and I can't remember my CPU, but it's up there. It's an i9 something, but that was the only thing I could think of, was that the hardware, there was a problem in software between the game and the hardware that I had, and that something wasn't meshing up right, and that was what was causing it. But to this day, I don't know why I experienced so many issues with it.
It's interesting because my PC is a generation behind yours in terms of processor and graphics card. And I've played Syndicate through completely twice. I didn't do a challenge run, but I have 100% sync in Syndicate, and I never experienced any issues like you described. So yeah, it does make me wonder. And also, PlayStation 5 players will sometimes see flickering in the textures. Actually, one of our guests told us some time ago that, and this may, I don't know if this is right, I've never looked, but that Syndicate is no longer possible to purchase it on the PlayStation Store. So it does make me wonder if there is something about significantly faster hardware that this game can no longer synchronize with or queue up the right animations or whatever. But it is interesting that such a specific fix, it's amazing that someone thought to try it and then document it as a fix for these kinds of bugs. Go on, Declan.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to say real quick, I'm very fortunate they did, because if they hadn't had that fix, I would not have done the run, because you would have been going, what was that, sequence 7, and that's 75% of the way through the game, just to pray that it doesn't break on you. I would have never done AC Syndicate no damage if I wouldn't have found that fix.
I just wanted to say on the glitches Syndicate, this is kind of bringing up something that I've been curious about for a while. So I originally played about half of Syndicate on PS4, and I actually had more glitches on Syndicate PS4 than I did Unity on PS4. Like, the only glitch I've ever had in Unity is I got stuck on a table, but I've had falling through the map on Syndicate on PS4 a few times. With the rope launcher, I've had it where Jacob's been glitched into a windowsill when using the rope launcher. I've had just complete crashes where the game would just shut down. But on Xbox Series S, I've had zero issues. But PS5, you cannot play Syndicate at all because of textures and lighting. So it's kind of like, is there a problem with Syndicate's code itself? Because PS4 is weaker than PS5, obviously, but I had tons of problems. Series S is slightly stronger than the PS4, but slightly weaker than the PS5, just hardware. But the Series X also runs Syndicate a lot smoother, and that's a little bit same strength as PS5, so maybe there's just something fundamentally in the code of Syndicate that makes it so unpredictably broken. I'm
Yeah,
not
I'm
a
not.
dev.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What I do in real life, would be akin to, I guess, a video game like lead producer, but on a much bigger scale. So I deal and hear about code and software and issues in software a lot. And that was the only thing I could kind of target as a hypothesis. It's got to be some kind of disconnect between what's coded and what's physically there in the build versus the system it's trying to run on being variable, right? As we talked about, the hardware being different. So I would tend to agree with you that it's probably there's got to be a disconnect there between those two.
It's just broken. That's what it's. I find it hilarious that I've played Unity and the only bug I've ever had was broken in the table. But but
I mean, I love Syndicate though. I love that game.
uh,
When I was doing my casual playthrough of it, like I told you guys, I never played it before because I was in the military and stuff like that, so I wasn't able to play it. So this was my first time playing it. I was like, this game is amazing. I love this so much. I even considered doing 100% no damage run of that game. And by the time I finally got done with the run and got it no damage, I was like, there's no way in hell I would do 100% no damage in this
I'm
game.
out.
to be
I
honest,
think it's nice to hear someone say that about Syndicate, because I don't know if this is true or not. I feel it's a little bit overlooked, and I think it's fantastic. I appreciate you had a very specific couple of bugs, which maybe they had just come into the game over time as other things have evolved. But in general, it's a very reliable game. It's a fun game. You've got a variety of stealth tools. Some of the mission design is fantastic. If you haven't played it, Hayete, I would definitely recommend. Just for, I mean, you could try a no damage run. That would be quite enjoyable. But just for fun, play the Jack the Ripper DLC. In my opinion, it's the best DLC. As a self-contained short story with some fantastic set-piece assassinations and some new tool types and kind of melee mechanics and so on. Absolutely brilliant. But nice to hear some positivity about Syndicate.
Yeah, I've had quite a few people ask me to do no damage on that DLC. I've had quite a few.
Really enjoyable. Yeah, it's an enjoyable DLC, that's for sure.
I've never actually played the DLC, and I don't intend to, but I've heard good things about it. It's meant to be good, and I just want to make the point, James, you are right, it is severely overlooked, but not to bash on Unity, but it is Unity's fault that it was overlooked.
True.
Because it's the most common game thing ever. If a sequel comes out and the prequel was buggy as hell, people just ignore it. And just happens. But Syndicate, and I don't care what anybody says, the grapple launcher is one of the best traversal mechanics in the series. You can at me on Twitter.
That grapple launcher is so amazing, and it allows you to do so much. Like I use it in so many ways for not only attacking but just getting around. So if you haven't played Syndicate, one of the things you have to do by, I believe it's sequence 7, maybe it's sequence 8, but you have to basically liberate a certain amount of areas before you can proceed. So one of the things I was doing was I was following basically the pathing that the world record holder for that game's speed run was using. So as I'm going through the game, I'm like unlocking certain areas and I'm doing the certain tasks to clear them out. Where applicable, some of them I had to do later because of no damage implications, but and full sync implications. But as you go through, just having that launcher and being able to like go across the river so simply, you don't have to drive. There's no one around you to damage you, so it's so safe. It was just that mechanic was how I felt about the hook blade in Revelations when I was going through the AC, the Ezio trilogy. Like, there's just so much you can do with it that it's, oh man, I miss that. I really do miss that.
I think what else makes it so great, and I know James can testify to this because I think you live near London.
I've actually been in London a few times in the last few weeks, and it's quite. I tell you what, I would just say, like, you walk around the city, the streets of London, and they really captured the atmosphere and the design. It's fantastic. It really is.
Well, you will know how big the buildings are in London, especially the Elizabeth Tower, which everyone does get wrong. It's not Big Ben, it's Elizabeth Tower, and Big Ben's the actual bell. I know everyone who not from Britain keeps calling the big tower Big Ben, but I learned that thanks to go-getters and CBeebies. But hey, tangent away. But actually imagining climbing up with the parkour system is an awful thought. But having the grapple launcher, you go scale Big Ben all you want. You go scale it. You got the you don't need to go up there. You got the grapple launcher. It's faster.
It's so amazing. It is such an amazing tool. So I think we should talk about Unity since one of you loves Unity so much. What questions do you have for
Guilty,
me for Unity?
guilty as charged.
None.
Right.
Unit is terrible. Boo.
Oh
That's
my
it, mate.
god.
I know.
I hated that game. I wrote a post or I wrote a comment to a post on someone that was like, "Hey, I know this is an unpopular opinion. You get these from time to time on the Assassin's Creed forum where someone will say, "Hey, I think Unity is crap." And then everyone comes in to destroy them. And I wrote this comment on there because at the time I was doing the casual playthrough, that first part of the process, and I was so annoyed. That game was so annoying coming off of Rogue. And oh man, and as I was going through it and fast forward to me getting the run, I realized why. And the thing about Unity that drove me nuts, number one is the whistle. I will die on that hill. That should have been in the game. But aside from that, the thing that drove me nuts was the simple fact that it didn't feel for me, it didn't feel like all the games I had played before. Now I had the obvious advantage or disadvantage, however you look at it, of playing all of those games back to back to back to back and then jumping into it, right? So all of the mechanics of the games that came before it were like really freshly, in my head. And so towards the end, when I finally got the run, when I was doing the write up, I don't hate this game anymore. It actually it kind of left me with this like quaint little charm. And I was like, why is that? And I reflected on it for a while. And I realized for me, it was the simple fact that I was comparing it to what came before. And I wasn't appreciating it for what it was. And for what it is, it's a very, very good game. And it took me the whole process, of first play to getting the no damage run to really realize that internally. And I really enjoyed it so much so that it was another candidate that I was like, maybe I'll do 100% no damage run on it. And maybe this is the point where I ask your audience, let me know what, and I'm asking this question to you, Declan, and James as well. If you had to pick one game from the series, please don't say Valhalla. So 100%
Okay.
no damage. What would you pick? What would you want to see done fully without damage?
My gut instinct is to say Unity would be potentially impossible is the wrong word because it's not impossible. Unity might be one of the harder ones because of the co-op missions, and particularly the harder cut. I mean, I have done all of the co-op missions solo, but that's with a fully upgraded set of gear. All the stats maxed out, and I'm happy to take damage. But some of those later co-op missions and the heist missions, they are very kind of weighted towards requiring or expecting people to be working in co-op. So my instinct is that Unity might not be the right candidate unless you just really don't care about your personal life and really want to go into it. I'm wondering. You see, is it Brotherhood's got the Leonardo mission, the famous tank mission that everyone hates, which again for me, I haven't done the tank mission, I need to be clear, but I do. Brotherhood will be my next one to replay when I finished Horizon Forbidden West, and I've already had people messaging me saying good luck with the tank mission, because I will do all of the Leonardo missions this time when I do my replay of Brotherhood. So I'm already thinking maybe not Brotherhood. Here's a question for you, and I appreciate I may be asking this and you'd have to sort of think on your feet, but if you were to do Revelations, or we can ask, when you did Revelations, how did you handle the den defense mini game within your rules? I know that's not the question. And that's not the question you asked me, but it's just popped into my head. Fine. So let's go.
You only have to do it once, and that's the tutorial. You never have to do it again in the main story. You never have to do it again. So I only had to do it for the tutorial, and that was it.
Okay.
I never touched it again.
Understood. See, I feel like Syndicate, again, accepting the fact that you did run into some bugs, my playthrough was very, very reliable, and the reliable mechanics, my experience of the reliable mechanics, make me wonder if Syndicate would be a good candidate. Because you can always just throw. I mean, Unity, if you get stuck, throw smoke, buys you time. You can think, escape or whatever.
Right.
I don't know the earlier games as well. I've probably Black Flag. I know pretty well. I've played through that a couple of times. Black Flag. No, you've got the legendary ships. Yeah, and then Rogue. You've got the Storm Fortress, which is another famous kind of very difficult to beat. Mind you, you would allow damage in that scenario, would you?
So on ships, yeah, you would if it's ship combat, or basically if you're fighting from the ship, I would allow it. But for example, like when you would board ships, right, I would not allow damage there. And my strategy was to use the cannon, little small cannon, and get as many kills as I could, and then use my pistol to kill whoever else to finish it off, so they would surrender or whatever. But since you mentioned the legendary ships, there was a technique that I kind of, I don't want to say invented or created. I'm sure someone else has stumbled on it, whether they've put it on YouTube or not. But there is a way to deal with some of these big ships that outgun you in a very effective way. And all you have to do is sail up right behind them. So if you're able to get right behind them, what the game AI is coded to do is, more times than not, unless something is blocking them, they'll turn left. So they'll want to go counterclockwise to track you. So all you have to do is simply stay up behind them and then just use the chain gun to stun them. So you use the chain gun to stun them, and then you use mortars in front of them. Chain gun to stun, mortars in front of them. And then if you happen to run out of that, you chain gun the front of them, and then you just slightly turn your boat, say, or your ship, say from a 12 o'clock position to a 2 o'clock position. So then, your guns are basically able to hit as they're making that turn left. And then you just full sails, you go back in, you chain gun them to slow them, and you get behind them. And generally, you'll have enough ammunition to kill anything. I don't know necessarily about the legendary ships. Obviously, that wasn't part of my run, but for like the Man-O-Wars or any kind of big ship that really outclassed you, that was a very good strategy and was very consistent.
I think I need to go and watch your Black Flag video, because that sounds fascinating to see.
But yeah, so what's your pick? Unity,
I think
Syndicate?
I think Black Flag. I'll tell you why.
Black Flag? Okay.
Because I think it's a relatively simple game, reliable. You have an asterisk, which I totally agree with, on the naval combat. You got some Templar hunts. You got some proper, scripted assassination missions in there, which are always enjoyable. I think that could be a good one. Yeah. What do you reckon, Declan?
Why don't you just do the mermaid technique for Black Flag? And I'm going to quickly explain before I give my answer, because my answer is just simple. The way to do the mermaid trick with Black Flag is don't engage ships. Once you engage ships, you can't back out of it. But if you spot a ship with your spyglass, and you got time on your hand, because sometimes it can take 30 minutes, longest it took was an hour real-time swimming, and I got an achievement for it. Just swim to the ships. It does work as long as you're not physically engaged, and then you can see them. Even if you're in a port and you can see a schooner, you could just literally dive off the port and just swim to them. You could climb aboard and kill them all. It's kind of fun. But my answer would be the one game that I have the most muscle memory for, and that would be AC1. I've played that game so much when it first came out that give me a few more months, I could probably learn the run and probably no damage it. Just by following.
Dude, I would love to see that. I'd love to see that. AC1 was like, I think I put it in my write-up. Worst mechanic or worst NPC in any Assassin's Creed game was those stupid beggars, man.
Worst NPCs.
And the guys that were like mental, because you would be trying to stealth through an area, you'd look like a little monk and you're going through, and then this guy would shove you right in front of guards, and that would pull you into alert, and you would have to run. And it was so obnoxious. I actually almost lost the run because of that. I can't remember what memory block it was. Maybe it was like 3 or 4, but It's the one where you have to go and assassinate the he's like the surgeon or the doctor or whatever. You go to his like little fortified place. He's got all the sick people there. It's the one where the guy escapes and he's like, break his legs, both of them, right?
Yes,
As
yes.
punishment. So inside of that area, I had a very good strategy. It was so solid, did it so many times in practice, never had problems. It was so consistent and very repeatable. And then on this run for this attempt, I go in there, and in the place where I set up to assassinate him, there's one of these guys to just going mental in the corner where he had never been before, never seen him there, didn't even know that NPC AI would go there, which is one of the reasons I chose that as the strategy. And this guy shoves me, or almost shoves me, right when the assassination target is walking by, or up like in front of me, and I felt my heart drop into my feet. I was like, "Oh my god, I just lost the run because this guy just shoved me." And thank God I was able to get it. But oh man, those are the worst NPCs.
So let me ask, because I'm not going to do it professionally because I really do not have the mental capacity, but I might do it for a joke stream next week. If you take damage, do you restart the whole game again?
Yes, absolutely. If you take any,
Okay, so then it is sorted. If I get free time next week, I am booting up AC1 on my Xbox and just for a giggle, see how far I can get without taking any damage. See if
that would be amazing
see if
because
my muscle memory's lost it.
AC1 is unique out of the whole series. For everyone listening that may not be aware, you don't actually have health in AC1. You have a synchronization bar. So anything you do, you don't even have to fall off of a rooftop and hit the ground, right? You could simply accidentally kill a civilian, or there's various things that can happen, but you can lose synchronization for things outside of damage. So it's very unique in the series in that you don't have a true health bar as you do in many games.
Plus,
That's
you have
very
that
interesting. Yeah.
really annoying thing where at the start you get all your gear stripped from you and all your abilities.
Yeah.
So then it would beg the question, because this is where I would screw up on a no damage run. When you have to do those tutorial missions inside the fighting pen, if you take damage in them, which I always do, I'm probably screwed.
You would have to restart. At least on my rule set. You can make whatever rules you
Nope.
want.
And you know what? I'm going to look at your Reddit post, I'm going to look at your rules, and this week, just for a one-off laugh, let's see how far I can get on stream doing no damage. I'd probably fail after 10 minutes.
I'm looking at. I tell you what, mate. You do that one week, and I'll come on next week, and I'll stream Black Flag and just see how far I get. That'd be fun.
You guys got to send me invites. I want to check it out.
All right, no, we'll do it. We'll do it. Yeah, that'd be fun. We do kind of occasional. We're not really regular streamers, but we post all of our episodes to YouTube, and we do occasional streams on our YouTube channel. I mean, for both of us, families and everything else allowing. But yeah, I do enjoy the occasional stream, so I'll be up for that. See how far I get into Black Flag.
I'll probably end up streaming through Twitch, because Xbox has this really annoying feature where you can't stream natively to YouTube. You have to stream natively to Twitch, so probably have to do all my Assassin's Creed stuff onto Twitch, because stupid Xbox, why can't I go to YouTube?
So what games haven't we talked about?
We haven't talked about, quite a few. Let's look through. So we've discussed AC.
Do we have time to talk about more?
Well, Revelations, we've not really... Talk about AC3, because AC3 kind of switched up the combat a fair bit. You had, was it chain kills? Was that introduced in AC3? Or was it Black Flag that introduced the chain kills?
I want to say it was 3. I might be wrong, but I want to say it's 3.
Yeah. Plus, you had a wider range of weapons. You had the tomahawk and so on. You had stalking zones in AC3, or was that AC4?
You did.
So
you have them in AC3.
Yes, tell us a bit about AC3. How did it feel coming off of the Ezio games into AC3, and how difficult was it to set this up?
So coming off Revelations, Revelations was so damn emotional for me. The story was just I know a lot of people don't care for it, but I was feeling it the whole way through, and I was no damaging it. And then there was just like the sad tear of like, okay, I'm gonna go on and no damage all these other runs, and there's no more Ezio, you know. Plus the like I said in the write up, that the intro for that game is the single greatest Assassin's Creed anything that I have seen. That opening cinematic of him going to Masyaf and doing the combat and just that whole cinematic is amazing, along with the music is amazing. So coming off of that and going to AC3, I was like, I don't really want to deal with Connor. But once I completed it, I was like really like um I was on the Connor train, man. I dug him. I don't think necessarily that the story is um the strongest in the series, but I think that there's a bit of bias there because of how it ends, right? And you've been with these characters for multiple games now, and the ending of three can kind of give you a black eye. But as far as the mechanics and the combat and the gameplay, I want to say in my post I wrote, if I remember correctly, that the combat animations in 3 were my favorite in the entire series. Just like the brutality of Connor's attacks, I think reads very well in that game, given his Native American background and the time period. So I really really liked that, and then the rope dart being introduced in that game. The rope dart in that game is the best iteration of it. The one in Black Flag actually has less utility and things you can do in combat than the one in 3. So that was something that immediately stuck out in my mind. But as far as the game as a whole, specific to my no damage run, I remember sequence 7 being such a pain in the ass because I didn't understand why I was taking damage. And that's when you everybody will remember this. You get to a point where you basically have to cross the battlefield
Oh my god!
and
I'm already.
get to
You've
the
taken me right back
assassination
to that
target.
pain.
Yeah. So this was another part that I had to research, and I went to YouTube and just pulled random videos, and I also went to speedrun.com because obviously that's a central focus point where you can find various videos from different people to kind of cross examine. So I pulled Assassin's 3 speed runs, and I pulled just random like let's plays and stuff off YouTube. And I was going through that section and trying to figure out where and why people were taking damage because I didn't understand. And it turns out that in the background, in the very, very background, which is very bright, by the way, for anyone who doesn't remember, it's very lit up in white. And then there's smoke and all kinds of stuff in front of it. But in the very background, there's like rows and rows and rows of like British infantry. And every so often, you'll see the flashes of all their muzzles from their muskets firing. That is the damage. That is the damage element coming in to the game. And I didn't realize that until I was cross-reviewing this guy he actually made it through no damage. He was doing it full sync, which says don't take damage. And he got through it. And I was like, what is he doing that I'm not doing? Because you have to cross these big gaps. And it just so happened that my eye keyed in on that point, and I had the theory of maybe that is the damage element coming through. That's what the developers wanted you to see. As soon as you see all of those muzzle flashes go off, that's when you're allowed to go. That's when you run. And so you're waiting for that to happen in the background. And as soon as I keyed in on that, that's exactly what it was. And I got through it every time with no damage on every attempt that I did. But prior to figuring that out, oh my God, it was hell on earth. I was like, I might not be able to do this run. I might have to allow it because I thought maybe it was developer damage. But then I was like, Hayete, wait, they're asking you to not take damage for the optional objective. So it has to be possible. So it caused me to lose some sleep. What was another one? Sequence 8. Sequence 8. The public execution, where you have to assassinate Hickey. For the optional objective, you have to not allow Washington to die or both of his bodyguards. You can allow one of them to die, but not both. And the problem with that one was you had to not let the bodyguards die, but then you also had to kill, if I remember correctly, a certain number of just regular enemies that were there before you assassinated Hickey. And Hickey runs faster than you. You're kind of like in the slow motion sequence, and Hickey always runs faster than you. And the rate that he gets ahead of you depends on the crowd, and the crowd is essentially just a big variable. So he can like bump into somebody, he can take a path around, a couple of people to the right versus on the left, from attempt to attempt. So it was this big variable mess. And I eventually found, I can't remember what it was, whether it was a video or a guide, but I had found somebody showing how they did it to complete the optional objectives. And what they did was they ran up, and as Hickey's on the stairs, he'll kill one of the guards. But then for whatever reason, if you shoulder check him, so you just kind of bump into him, it pulls his AI out of combat and makes him look at you and locks him onto you. So that was how I kind of defeated the mechanic of him killing the bodyguards. And then I just basically had to block his and kill some other people. And then once I got that optional objective out of the way, I would kill Hickey. But I remember that being such a miserable section because I didn't know what to do. I thought it was just complete RNG and that I would just have to roll the dice when I got to that section. So that one was rough. And then what was another one? Sequence 11. When you're doing ship combat and you have to destroy the loyalist reinforcements. And the optional objective on that is to destroy the powder stores on 2 frigates. And trying to get the powder store exposed on the second one was miserable because it's not complete RNG, but the hitboxes or something in the code is not done properly there, where you can basically do the same thing multiple times and you'll see a different result. So it's not consistent. And that one caused me a problem because the first powder store, you're given that one. The second one, essentially you have to ram or shoot a ship in a very specific spot at the front of it, kind of in the 2 or 10 o'clock position off the front of the ship to expose it. And then you can use your, your side cannon or whatever to explode it. And it basically turned out to be a roll the dice thing. Basically, I would slow it down and then I would just approach it and I would ram into it and just pray to God that when I rammed into it, I hit whatever that hitbox is to expose it and then destroy it. So I think, yeah, those would be the areas for AC3 that caused me the most pain. Everything else was very easy, very simple, very consistent and repeatable. So yeah, that was my AC3 experience.
AC3, I sprinted through it. I've only played it once, and I did the main story only. I ignored all the optional objectives. I just kind of played for the story and moved on. I think I've said this before, Declan. I think my synchronization level in AC3 is about 35% because I really did ignore every damn side event, every optional thing. But I remember it being a very, very enjoyable game to play. I quite enjoyed the story, I must say. But again, something for me this year will be to go back and replay all of them and just remind myself of the story, but also build on everything I've learned over the last couple of years and see how my opinions change. One thing I did want to very quickly call out, you didn't play Liberation. Is that because you don't own it or because it's kind of, some people would say it's not a mainline game and others would?
So I own it, and I actually played through it right after AC3. I played through Liberation. I quickly realized, like, okay, this game would be very quick. Revelations, I think I got through Revelations in a couple of attempts. I think I put that in my write-up. I don't remember how many, but it was a couple of attempts. I got through Revelations very quickly. The hardest part in Revelations was the sequence 1 cart drag and then the very end where you kind of paraglide around buildings, right? In between that, though, everything was very simple. And I felt like Liberation was the same way. It was very simple. The optional objectives weren't too crazy. There wasn't really a section of the game that I felt was very, very complex. I think it was made for a console system, be it the PS Vita or whatever it
Yeah, it
was. I can't
was.
remember,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
so I knew that if I was going to do that one, it wouldn't be too long or too hard, at least in my opinion. But I wanted to do the main games, and I put a post on the Assassin's Creed forum asking the community, is Liberation, because I'd never played Liberation before, and I was like, is this considered a mainline game or is this DLC? And the answer I got back pretty unanimously from everyone was, it is not a mainline like game. It's not a main title. It's a side title. So I just made the decision to stick within the main line games, and that's the only reason I didn't do it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. It's kind of like Rogue. It's much shorter. From memory, it's just 8 sequences, eight memory sequences with a number of memories inside each one. But I remember it being enjoyable. Very similar to AC3, of course. Very light, very fast. Everything
I thought
works
the system
reliably.
in it was really interesting. Given if you were wearing a certain outfit, you
Oh
were
yeah.
constrained to a certain type of approach, and they would give you certain benefits and certain
Mm,
negatives. I thought that
mm.
was really interesting. But yeah, I remember it. I think I beat it in like 2 days, and then like I said, I reached out to Reddit to find out if it's
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
something I should pursue.
yeah. Understood. So what's next then?
Within Assassin's Creed or
Or
anything.
within your kind of what's your next target for your 100%? Or sorry, not 100%, for your no damage run.
Yeah, so I just came off of finishing God of War, the most recent one, the 2018 release.
Oh, I
Um,
saw your tweet about that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I just came off of that. It's not released yet because it takes forever and a day for YouTube to process at
Mm-hmm.
1440p. The run's like 7 hours and some change long, so it's fairly lengthy. But I just came off of that one, and the one that was next on my queue list was Spider-Man PS4. So I'm going to be doing that one on New Game Plus Ultimate, which I believe is the hardest difficulty, and that's what I'm actively working on right now. Beyond that, I'm eagerly awaiting Gotham Knights. That looks very, at least from the gameplay and stuff I've seen, it looks very akin to Valhalla, Odyssey, Origins type gameplay. And since I've done the no damage run for Arkham Knight, I'm looking to get back into a Batman game, so I'm targeting that one. And then Hogwarts Legacy, oddly enough, I'm really, really aiming at that one. The gameplay reveal that they did like a month ago or whatever, I saw countering, I saw blocking, I saw dodging. All of those mechanics generally are akin to lending themselves or contributing to being able to be done without damage. So those two I'm targeting for later in the year when they release. But that's pretty much it. In my Discord, I have like a long queue list that people kind of contribute to. So I've got other games on that one. But yeah, that's pretty much where my mind's at right now.
Sorry, and I'm really going off tangent, but I heard Hogwarts Legacy, and I'm like, can we talk?
Sure.
I'm hyped for that game. Like, I'm not gonna go full into because this is Assassin's Creed, but currently saving up for it. But you made a tweet that actually just reason why I want to bring this up. You mentioned Ravenclaw,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that would mean, because I did the Pottermore test and everything, because I'm a stranger, we're in the same house, buddy.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I,
Hang on, are you
in
both
that tweet, I was
Ravenclaws?
like,
Yep, we're both
yeah,
Ravenclaws.
Happy days. That sign me up. That's me too.
nice, man. Like minds. That's awesome. Yeah, I think in that tweet I was like, I should probably go Hufflepuff just because doing a no damage run would probably line up more towards those ideals. But I was like, honestly, like Ravensclaw, man. That's me as a person, as Hayete. That's where I would be aligned to anyway. So.
All right, Declan, I think we've been talking for a long time. We should probably wrap up the show. What I'll say to everyone listening is we'll put links to Hayate's main Reddit post And from there, you can read each of his summaries of each game. We'll definitely put a link to your YouTube channel in there because you've got all of your uploads, which is fantastic. You got any closing comments, Hayete? If someone said to themselves, "I want to try this," what game would you recommend someone who's doing this for the first time should choose from the franchise?
Honestly, there's not enough deviation and complexity necessarily. I mean, each game has its areas, right? I would probably say start with whichever one you really are the most fond of, because then in that regard, you'll enjoy playing it because, like I said earlier, you're going to fail over and over and over again. And you really need to enjoy the game that you're failing at, because if you're if you're miserable playing the game, that's only going to make the process excruciating. So that would be where I would say to start. And like I said earlier as well, I very much like the educational aspect of challenge running and imparting information. So my videos are there for anyone who wants to try it, and my Discord is linked in every single video, and I answer every single comment, as long as they're not troll comments. So yeah, reach out to me and ask, and I'd be happy to talk about it.
Awesome, thank you very much, Declan.
And
over to you.
You've given me inspiration now for a casual stream next week to try no damage AC1, which I'm probably going to suck at. So, thank you so much for Hayete for joining. I have learned magical hyperlinking magic, so his Reddit post will be in the Spotify description for to listen to. If you've got any comments, or if you've ever tried a no damage run, you can reach out to me and James at assassinscreed.letstalk@gmail.com, or you can reach us on Twitter at ACLetsTalk or at JamesTillyCred. And if you want to support the show by playing an Assassin's Creed game, then I've got the deal for you. This week's deal, because Hayete brought it up, is Syndicate, which at the moment you can get for as little as £5 and 9p for PC and £8.49 for Xbox, or £13 on Gold Edition with DLC, all through CD keys. Remember, check the link in the description for all things CD keys for tons of deals. You'd be surprised what Assassin's Creed deals you can find. And every purchase does help the show out just a little bit so we can make more magical content like this. And hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Thanks very much, everyone. See you soon.